Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let's hop in. Today is Wednesday, November 2nd. Starting a little bit later than I'd like, but not too terrible. Let's see. Is there anything really new about this new season of Ranked Duel? There will be a Duelist Cup between 8th and 18th to suck out all your time playing Ranked. Let's see, I ended, I think, at gold, so I'm now back down to silver tier 5, so I'd have to go all the way up to gold to even catch up. Yeah, it really would have been nice to make platinum to start at gold tier 5, but it didn't happen, whatever. If anything, that's just another nail in the coffin of a game that is relatively new as far as just my enthusiasm for this game, in that it is adding a lot in the solo stuff, but it's not really accommodating the amount of rank play I would like to actually put into it. It's asking for a lot more rank play than it probably should. While not really giving you the best reason that you would want to play that much. There's just not enough rewards for it. And at a certain level, it could just be if the daily rewards gave you more gems, that might affect things. If this was 400 for each of these daily quests instead of 40, that might affect things. But honestly, it's not going to affect things that much. Some of these daily quests need to give you packs. They need to give you something different. Just a secret pack or something being a daily reward after you first unlocked a secret pack, or a artistic element here, which these are fairly useless. So there is a potential player who's been a free-to-play player of this game since day one that has just never realized that dual fields exist or purchased them. And so if those were potentially a daily quest, if you hadn't purchased them, or if card protectors or icons were rewards at random, that'd be something. But most simplistically, if you just gave away as daily rewards a pack here, a pack here, these normal packs, or a secret pack, or even legacy bonus packs, like any of those could be something to spice it up. But at the core, you have half of this screen that is empty half of the time. You have no reason to do casual matches. You have no reason to do the duel room. That brings you to a quarter of the screen as far as options to play ranked. And then when you're playing ranked, you really can't play other decks other than your best deck you've got, and you just got to play that best deck over and over again. And see, this has been a problem for many collectible card games. Like if you're playing a Magic the Gathering, for instance, in the standard rules of Magic the Gathering, you have to play one of a small selection of good decks if you're playing at any kind of ranked level. Whereas if you're playing a cube, or if you're playing draft in Magic the Gathering, which are concepts that completely don't exist in this game, but could exist easily, that's where you have some more randomization and some higher chances to play more cards. Draft is where you open a bunch of packs and then you take turns going around the table with multiple players selecting cards from those packs. So it's completely random. A cube is similar to a draft, except for the fact that a cube, as I understand it, it's kind of hard to remember now. It's like a draft, but you're not opening random packs. You're actually opening a selection of like cards that have been handpicked, so there's a little bit more strategy behind it. Or even if you're playing like custom decks, that's something. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel has had some events. The events really are just, let's change the rules as far as what kind of cards can be played, and then force the player to create a new deck, instead of just saying, hey, here's a bunch of loner decks, and you're going to play with these loner decks, and only these loner decks. So I'm starting to get a little worried for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in that it potentially creates a situation where I may be burnt out of this game fairly quickly. And one thing that occurred to me is that Project Nikkei game is out today, so I could be installing it and playing it right now just to check it out, although I don't really have a lot of hope for Project Nikkei either. But it didn't even occur to me that it might have a Steam version and PC version like Marvel Snap did. If that were the case, that it did have a version that was PC, I could potentially be playing that gacha game during these live streams, and that would be more than likely more animated and more automated. Right, well, this is probably not going to work. But yeah, I hadn't heard of any talk of it being on Steam or PC though, so I suspect it isn't. Marvel Snap still exists, and Marvel Snap in particular is completely unplayable if you don't have the daily quests available, which that's a red flag certainly in any game. If I really love the game, if I really loved Marvel Snap, I should be able to play it and grind something out, earn just even a few bits of resources that feel valuable after the daily quests have been done. But that's just not the case at all. Marvel Snap, in its experimentation of making a very fast card game, has succeeded in making a very fast card game and proving that that is not something that at least I personally want, and I don't think many people want in the long run. There is always a complaint about card games being too long, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is no exception there. But they have gone so far in the other direction with Marvel Snap that it just doesn't make any sense. I probably, at this point, wasting my time playing Marvel Snap for no reason, have unlocked, I would say somewhere between 60 and 80% of all the cards. I've upgraded a couple cards past the shiny logo stage, and the next thing it gives you, after shiny logo being incredibly disappointing as a reward, is an animated frame, which is again just also very disappointing. So I can only assume that at that 7th tier of upgrade, which I think is after animated frame, but maybe there's one more after animated frame, I can only assume that it does an animated background or something. So somewhere in the middle is when you get to the best version of actually looking at the character in these card upgrades, visual upgrades for these cards, and everything above that is just ridiculous extra visuals, which in all fairness, like foil versions of a lot of cards in the real world are ridiculous extra visuals that are just there to create this artificial feeling of value. But yeah, it is really crazy in Marvel Snap. And it's really crazy that that is the only system. Again, it really feels like Marvel Snap either has to throw out a ridiculous amount of new cards very quickly, or it's just going to be dead. Everybody is going to have every card that exists in the game within the first couple of months. Which one of these have we not summoned already? I think we probably have summoned them both, but maybe we can have some luck here. Can't do anything else. I need to play my other deck, actually, come to think of it, in this game, because I have a daily quest that requires special summoning, and there's just no cards to special summon at all, which once again highlights the problem with this deck that I need to, if I cared enough, I would have spent time to try and figure it out, how to get around that. Because this is, or at least at one point was, a decently winning meta deck, but they've now added new daily quests that require special summoning, and that just doesn't happen. My favorite mobile game, Destiny Child, from Shift Up, Shift Up is also half the companies that are making Project Nikkei, is still doing its thing, but they finally have started to catch up to try and explain a lot of weirdness. I think the story, as I heard it, is that they shifted from one artist making Destiny Child, just doing all the art, and they may have even at that point shifted from one writer writing the story, and that at that point you have the main character that you'd been following from the beginning turned into a completely different looking character named Mitra, which that was a big twist and reveal, and I thought that was just going to be one season long. But ever since that's happened, the game has felt very surreal. Like the entire universe has just changed. The entire this narrative that we're following is just not in the same parallel universe as what the first 2 or 3 seasons of Destiny Child had been. And yeah, that would have been that was a transition, certainly, but it was something that I feel like I kind of got used to. But now, as the story has also evolved, and this very possibly is just going around in circles with their narrative. There is this third character named like Duelian, who is actually like this super powerful character that reincarnated as the first character in the game and then changed into Mitra. So there's this whole like extra mystery around it that's pretty wild and crazy. Which, yeah, surreal is really, I think, the right word to use. Is to say that this, it does just come off as hard to follow and hard to believe that's the way the story went. And there's a real desire on my part to just get back to the status quo. My real concern, certainly though, my bigger concern with Destiny Child would be, as Project Nikke comes out very quickly, they just abandon and stop trying to do anything with Destiny Child, and they just wrap up the story and then shut down the service. Which, that would be an interesting ending to that journey, certainly. But not particularly welcome. The game effectively is dead if they stop adding new characters, new anime waifus into it. They don't have to add them as often as they are, but if they're not adding some new event or some new character every month, then the whales that are spending a lot of money in the game, well, it would go away. So if they were to stop adding new content but leave the game up, that would allow some people to potentially catch up, but it would drastically change what the game is, and it would be a major grind fest, even for how much of a grind fest it is now. Can this do anything? No battle damage. Yeah, I would really expect the game would be like Destiny Child really would be more like a just kind of short narrative experience if all the events went away and it was just, I mean, you probably would have to redefine how the entire game worked at that point and turn it away from being a gacha game into being, I don't know, some kind of ad-laden narrative experience where you unlock all the characters. In a funny way, it wouldn't probably be too different from what Marvel Snap is, because on the upgrade levels in Marvel Snap, you're kind of guaranteed to make progress and eventually unlock all the cards and eventually upgrade all the cards if you just keep on playing. Whereas in Destiny Child, since there's a whole lot more microtransactions around the gacha game, and some of those microtransactions, or a lot of them, are kind of time limited, or odds are very low that you'd get the characters otherwise, you would pretty much have to change it. And I would put more money betting that Marvel Snap turns into a microtransaction-laden game where to unlock things is the only way to really unlock things, is to spend money. Then I would put money on Destiny Child redoing itself like that. There is definitely an argument that you could have taken the story before the whole Mitra stuff and tried to turn it into a different type of game, but they're gonna have to really work hard to make this story make sense. now with the Mitra stuff and the Dukelon stuff. It kind of feels like the whole season, or the whole past year, has been nothing but a dream. And that's very possibly exactly what happened, is that it's been nothing but a dream. Well, I imagine people are not that interested in hearing me talk about Destiny Child. For the accountability section, to wrap up that, I will say that I am still playing Darkest Dungeon, and I'm making small steps forward in progress with Darkest Dungeon, but it is fairly grindy, fairly repetitive, and I really do have this fear that I'm just going to get bored with Darkest Dungeon before I actually get successful with Darkest Dungeon. So, yeah, there really isn't too much more to say there. Because the game is just so repetitive. In a certain way, if I found something to really love about Darkest Dungeon, I could see myself playing it instead of a trading card game like this, but there's just not something there that I really love. And yeah, it really does just feel like it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now, it may very well be a case that the characters only get up to max level 6, and so I have some characters that are approaching a level 3. And once you start to upgrade their armor and their attacks in the blacksmith even by 1, and upgrading their attacks in the guild hall by even 1, that there is kind of a massive change there. And once their resolve level goes up by even 1, they take considerably less stress. So everything does seem like it is working. That feels like that's a different animation, or a new animation. But it is slow, to say the least, to get through Darkest Dungeon. Also, finally, YouTube let my channel get a YouTube handle, and it basically just offered me the handle at Rydo of all, capital R, capital O, capital A. I don't know if the capitals really matter, which that's all that my personalized URL was in the first place. The problem here, and it seems like it's a fairly obvious problem that they have taken not into account at all, is that there is a issue of who deserves what, if anybody deserves anything, as far as handles. And this is a problem that will be with any service, any new service or old service that is introducing handles. There is a channel that is just called Rydo, R-Y-D-O, and it was started by somebody 13 years ago. So they got in early, and so now they have that incredible short 4-character handle and personalized URL. Has that person even looked at their channel in the past 13 years? Very possibly no. Not. They haven't upgraded it. They haven't published any videos in 13 years, and they only published 2 videos anyways, so their channel really should be a non-published, like, private channel, in my opinion. But there is no system that they have mentioned to say, wait a minute, this person probably isn't going to respond, probably didn't respond. I mean, they should try to be as fair about this, because this, if I'd make a statement that says, well, this person that has at Rydo should have that stripped away from them and it should be given to me because I'm the Rydo on YouTube that's really got the most views and deserves it more. Well, if I make that argument, then the exact same argument could be used against me and a bunch of other people. And very unfairly pick and choose winners and losers, which is frankly something YouTube is not above doing, and more than there is a decent chance they will decide to do that or something like that anyways. And maybe there is some level at this where they will release handles on channels, but they really don't have a system that seems to indicate that. It seems like 100% if you have any kind of YouTube channel like Rydo does, you will get the handle automatically handed to you, and there is no second phase or evaluation for it, and no way. They want everything to be automated, so there's no way to do anything there. I guess the only thing you would try to do, and the right thing to do, would be to try to very kindly contact the person and ask them to go to change their handle to something else. That is the only thing I could ask. And I don't know if he did change the handle, if that would then free it up in their automated system for me to grab it, or if somebody else would grab it. But that's the only proper, like, civilized thing to do, is to ask them directly to let it go. And at some point they may come back and go no, they want to say pay me, and I'll be like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. Or, I mean, like, because doing anything else is a little too forceful. I don't want people harassing the person. I don't want people flagging his channel. I don't want anything like that. And there's no guarantee at all that any of these handles would free up anyways, even if that one channel is gone. So I'm not trying to have an internet war against somebody who did nothing wrong other than making a channel earlier than me and getting a really short handle because of that. And this was certainly the problem with Twitter too, and it's certainly where the idea of having a verified check mark had some value, but even in Twitter's instance of the blue check marks, that didn't really give you the handles that you felt like you would have deserved. And there's like a real danger now as far as these handles coming in, that people will say at Rydo or Rydo in comments, and they will be contacting that person, which is an interesting thought, and something else that YouTube hasn't really addressed is that, can you just tag random people in the comments of other channels? And it's gonna suck because I'm gonna have to basically add a comment to like his 13-year-old video and hope that he sees it, because that's like the only thing I can do. Hmm. Graveyard, banish that, just in case. He's trying to do an Exodia, I guess. So yeah, I guess basically all I'm saying there is that I've got some work that I personally need to try and contact the person and see if I can warn him away from the spam that he's going to potentially end up having. And ask him to release the handles to avoid that spam so that I could use it for whatever it's worth. And if I was a slightly bigger YouTuber, I'd almost certainly have a channel manager that I would just contact, and then the channel manager might have more options or better options. Of course, those more options or better options might very well turn into just bullying the person or taking away, unilaterally taking away his handle. And frankly, fighting over digital clout that has no actual value is kind of silly and a waste of time. And it's something I would only do in the hopes that my channel at some point became big enough. Alright, well, let's talk about video game news. Since we started a little late, there's really not a good reason to stretch this out. Let's see. Here we can show off some of the visual changes that YouTube is looking for. Ambient mode adds flair to videos and gives you the opportunity to create it. This mode splashes a little color to the app background. So you can try playing with the borders, closed captions, and color. Not really telling you much there. Not even really doing the greatest of job of showing it, because like the ambient mode really is just stretching out the colors of the backgrounds in the mobile version, and as far as the app version for TVs and the desktop version, I hadn't heard of them doing anything there, and it doesn't really feel like they're doing anything here. So yeah, it is definitely a bigger challenge, certainly when you have multiple videos on the screen, or to have something that's more of an ambient mode. Apps and websites having ambient modes are not something that people have really done a lot of things. Cliff Bleszinski has a new book out, and I question whether there's a lot that you can actually glean from Cliff Bleszinski. I don't know if he's really as important of a character as he has sold himself as. In a lot of ways, I think when I think of Cliff Bleszinski, I think of a young teenage-like mentality that came up with ideas like Gears of War and had a passion for it, for those just generic ideas, and those generic ideas that led to the creation of Gears of War then were implemented by a team that's getting much less credit than it deserves to actually make a game that works around that. And when you think about the generic ideas of Gears of War, putting a chainsaw on a gun is very much like a young teenage mentality concept and making your a generic first-person shooter around that is not that creative or imaginative. In a lot of ways, I wonder if maybe there shouldn't be a position of a producer or lead designer. Cliff Bleszinski in particular, I think, is one of these characters that allowed himself to get way more credit than he deserved, and even potentially encouraged to get himself to get a lot more credit than he deserved. Meanwhile, it is, I think, also worth pointing out that the Gears of War series probably would have never existed in the first place, and if it had existed, it wouldn't have even been anywhere as successful as it was if it weren't for the fact that the Xbox 360 desperately needed a first-person shooter to compete with Halo, or perhaps not even compete is the wrong word, just complement Halo, complement Modern Warfare, complement some of the other first-person shooter games that the dude bros that were buying Xboxes would want. Like, before the Xbox and the Xbox 360, the need to potentially have a new shooter 3 or 4 times a year was non-existent. And after bringing in the dude bros, which is who they were marketing to with the Xbox, the need became much higher. And in a lot of ways, the gamer bros, dude bros, whatever you want to call them, were still so hung up on playing Halo that it was a struggle to even get the Halo players to move over to a Call of Duty or to a Gears of War at a much lesser extent. I'm just trying to hope I'm doing the right ones, but I'm not sure. That's not what I meant to do. That was a mistake. Whatever. Activate this. Toss this. In the turn. Yeah, I'm trying to cover the news and play at the same time, and that's not working. Cliff Bleszinski basically says he thinks Epic ran out of ideas for Gears of War before selling it to Xbox. The franchise former lead designer thinks the Fortnite maker also needed the money at the time, which, yeah, totally believable. That there's probably not a lot to take from that otherwise, and it is like after Xbox bought the franchise that Gears of War tried to do something a little bit different, whereas talking about like Gears of War 1, 2, and 3, which is I think about the ones that Epic would have made, you had a very simplistic story going on there, and then it's 4 and 5 when they start to introduce experimentations like ice sailing and Dom's wife playing a bigger role, and even the characters feeling like characters instead of just being action character parodies. I don't know if this scaling up and down was something, was actually a element to the gameplay. In a lot of ways, I guess it is a case that Gears of War is the equivalent of, let's say, what is that, Fast and Furious movie series, and that's fine if it can get even to that level, where it is kind of this ridiculous, over-the-top parody of an experience, but yeah, they started to experiment. Did they really succeed in experimenting greatly with the last couple of Gears of Wars? Not really. Moving it into a lot of ice stuff was weird. Snow, and having more of an open world element was weird. There definitely doesn't feel like there's a vision behind the Gears of War series, as somebody who hasn't played any of them. But yeah, it is. It is kind of like a B-tier type action flick type game, and it should exist. Like, either you make another Gears of War, or you make a game that's a lot like Gears of War. Maybe at this point it makes more sense to make a game that's a lot like Gears of War, but gets rid of some of the anchors around the neck of the Gears of War series, because like Dom and the chainsaw guns and all of that, they're very iconic, yes, but they've outlived their usefulness. Inherently, if Microsoft wanted to do something great, they would take the team, whatever teams are left and whatever programmers are left that worked on Gears of War, and they would put them into making a licensed Earth Defense Force game. Since we know that the Earth Defense Force team cannot really program or animate things nicely, and yet that series is super popular in Japan, and we know they kind of want to sell more games in Japan, or more Xboxes in Japan. So it probably would be a match made in heaven to say, hey, let us license the concept of Earth Defense Forces, and let's make our own twist on the game and make it look way better, and we can have your Japanese team work on it somewhat too. Probably not take the reins, but maybe parallel development, but all the animation at the very least could be in the hands of this bigger team. It probably would be best just if they licensed it. But yeah, you take that Earth Defense Forces storyline and title, and you'll have a new series of games, or a new take on a series of games for the Western audience, and in for the Eastern audience, and you're still basically doing the same thing. It's just a bunch of people shooting monsters or bugs. Or you just make a whole new series of aliens being shot by militaries. Or you just recognize that the general concept there is still from the Starship Troopers movie, so why not just make a licensed Starship Troopers game? Wouldn't that make a lot of sense too? Like, there's a lot of things I imagine you can pull off if you just break out of the mold of Gears of War being a thing. The other problem, as we look at Larry Orb's, Major Nelson's Twitter here, which Twitter is still a thing for me at this point. We shall see if it stays a thing. You can see he has a banner here, which I don't know if I could like zoom in much more than this. Yeah, it's pretty small on your screen, I imagine, but we can see you're talking 25 games coming out in 2023, 25 games in 2022. Some of these are not, some of these are already out. There I didn't play, so I just lost in the ranked game when there was no reason for me to do that. But the bigger concern here is kind of the cronyism here. Major Nelson's got this book written by Cliff Bleszinski, Cliffy B, who I don't feel like is working in the video game industry. He left the industry, then he came back, and I think he's left the industry again. So not really a character that's even really that relevant, but there's cronyism. Obviously, there's been relationships between Larry Orb and Cliff Bleszinski, and so they're going to have him on this podcast to promote his book. Whereas, in contrast, and I don't think it is that big of a contrast to make, I doubt Larry Orb has ever brought on any other author who has written about the history of video game development or the video game industry that wasn't directly involved in creating that history. So any kind of like objective historian writing something, notably the author, say, of Game Over is a pretty good book, and I think there's been several different versions of it talking about the beginnings of first generation, second generation video game stuff. That author, I imagine, has never come on his podcast or never been invited on his podcast. And for the most part, Major Nelson's podcast really isn't that type of podcast where it's looking to create any kind of intellectual thought patterns. It really is just more of a hype pattern, talking about the games that are out right now and what games they're playing. And in fact, I would say Major Nelson seems less and less prevalent, on this podcast. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but he doesn't seem like he's showing up as much, and that they are slowly moving him to be potentially the head of all of Microsoft and not even in charge of Xbox. And then at that point, I imagine he won't have much to say. There is a silly argument to be made, but not the craziest of arguments, that if Major Nelson did become in charge of Microsoft, that he would significantly reduce the focus of Microsoft away from non-Xbox stuff, because there is almost certainly too many people working on Windows, just changing Windows 11 for no good reason, or promoting Word or making new versions of Word for no good reason. The Azure server stuff still makes a lot of sense. Workstation stuff still makes sense. So Windows does need some level of support, but yeah, it is much more, it's much sexier, for lack of a better term, to be in the business of selling video games and video game consoles than it is to be selling Word or Excel. And there really isn't much of a reason for a new business to set itself up around using Word or Excel, other than possibly kids are still being taught to use Word and Excel instead of, say, LibreOffice or Google Documents, which are effectively free. The augmented reality VR stuff that Microsoft is focusing on, I don't think is worth it either. Yeah. Almost certainly, Cliff Bleszinski's book will get talked about far too much, and it will be quote mined quite a bit. And that we'll hear over the next couple of weeks a lot of quote mines and comments from somebody who is fairly irrelevant. Like, he's just not in the industry, and he didn't really make as much of an impact in the industry. Basically, when you're writing a book about yourself, you're guaranteeing that you're just an egomaniac trying to promote yourself. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna work. If I normal summon this, activate this, activate this, don't do anything here. And if we normal summon this, start that all over again. So, going in circles aspect of this deck is really part of its major issues, that you just banish cards and then activates their ability to resummon them. And let's see, we'll go ahead and see if we can activate this. And see, now when this is normal summoned, I probably won't be able to normal summon anything else. And then we activate this one. Put that one face down at 800. Then we attack here. Attack here. And attack here. Oh, I suppose I should mention, there's not a lot to say. I'm still just doing the final polishes of my guest Wi-Fi Raspberry Pi project. I did install unintended upgrades to install security updates, but not software updates or feature updates, which is maybe a little too cautious, but it should be fine. But it is also something that I had not even thought of and would have totally forgotten about, so there was a potential version where I would have just left it as whatever it was as far as the versions and security versions of the software. It's risky in both directions. Like, at any point a security update has a small chance of breaking things as much as any kind of update has a small chance of breaking things. Although Raspbian is based on Debian, and Debian is particularly cautious around the idea of not breaking things and not having major upgrades of the kernel, which means no major upgrades of the software, really. But there have been more flaws found in OpenSSL that they were talking about, and it does seem like there's just some real security problems. Most devices, I would say, even if they are connected to the internet, don't have anything built, even if they're built on Linux, probably aren't designed to update themselves and automate that process. Your router, which effectively this is what this is it is an extra router, it's an extra guest Wi-Fi access point. A standard small home office router probably is not upgrading anything at all, or updating anything at all. If you're doing DDWRT and running custom firmware on it, you're not getting automatic updates on any software there by default either. So it is actually kind of out of the norm for me to install the package called unintended upgrades. It's actually a program called that. Let's see. If I were to summon this, I think you're safe to summon this, and then I guess the question here is, can we just win without wasting a bunch of time? I did give some more thought to potentially changing the titles. I certainly could say Let's Play in front of every title and make that be a label. I don't know if that really would get me any more views, but it might be slightly more descriptive, and it might help a little. So that is a thought to potentially experiment with. I would probably want to find like one series that goes fairly long and see if that worked. Scheduling things that way. And yeah, if I was big enough, I would consider the advice that was given to me to just be cryptic and not tell the title of the game even in the video, and just go full clickbait. Why did that do half the damage? Well, he had something that was doing half the amount of damage than he should have been taking. You do all that work to get a victory, and you're not even getting much from it. I we may want to just stop here. OBS announced version 2.28.1, or with a hotfix of 28.1.1. I guess what I'm probably doing is I'm keeping my OBS version though at the latest version of the previous significant number. I'm probably, I think, at somewhere around 27.1.3, and I'm more than happy to stick with that. I don't need to be on the cutting edge. Having more stability definitely is ideal. Alright, now I think what we'd want to do here is like destroying a card, dueling in solo mode, and special summoning 5 monsters. It's the special summoning 5 monsters that's the problem. So we need to play one game with our old Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck and see if maybe that works. Like ideally, if the meta has changed and we could go back to the Zodiac Tri-Brigade, I would be happier with that. That was a slightly faster deck. It's a more varied deck. It's a more interesting deck. But if the meta changed, there's also a big chance that the meta is just now with a completely different set of cards, and this is as bad of a deck as always, or is even worse of a deck. I guess, and meanwhile, while this is happening, we'll go through the Video Games Chronicles articles. Netflix has acquired Cozy Grove Studios' Spry Fox, the Triple Town and Alpha Bear developers, Netflix's 6th in-house game studio to acquire, which there still seems to be no real desire to get into anything other than mobile gaming, and owning 6 different companies to make mobile games may be really an example of them just not really knowing the way things are done in the mobile game industry. Like, unless they're just gonna try to do something crazy, which Netflix has done things crazy before as far as quality. There is definitely a much higher ambition amongst Netflix's creations as far as streaming video compared to Freevee, which doesn't really create much of anything as new content, or Amazon Prime, which does create some high quality videos but very little of it, or Hulu, which barely creates anything new at all. So if Netflix is not comparing itself to those low tier streaming services and then is instead comparing itself to Disney Plus, which is trying fairly hard, and at a certain level I think even Peacock and some of the other streaming services are trying really hard to make good quality stuff and spending a lot of budget on it. If that is the same mentality as far as mobile games that they're looking at, we may start to find that all the good games that practically don't exist in mobile games are coming from Netflix. It's still a very hard sell though. I really couldn't imagine that I would want to keep or maintain a Netflix subscription because there was even 6 really good games. Plus, with the subscription model of Netflix, I don't know how that's going to really change what a mobile game is. Like the microtransaction nature of of mobile games very possibly goes out the window in favor of something else. Let's see what happens here. Let's see if this guy can destroy my strategy. Because we are basically playing my old deck versus, or my current new deck against my old deck. So if this deck beats this deck, that may make an argument that this deck was always better. And it has to be pointed out that no one viewer stays around on my channel that long, or stays commenting on my channel at the least that long. So Sniper Ranger's push towards making a new deck, and this deck being really the only one I could make, almost immediately within a week or two, then was responded to as far as Sniper Ranger not being around as much. Is that in part because I wasn't really loving this new deck? Well, maybe. Like, I can take certainly some blame for that. I think in general, not to single Sniper Ranger or any of my fans out, I think in general a lot of people like to backseat drive or give suggestions to streamers, and yet I suspect that they don't feel very satisfied when the streamers capitulate to that and actually do allow them to make decisions. Moving on with the video game news. Looks like Sackboy is off to a slow start on PC. Data suggests it's Sony's least popular PC release to date with 600 peak concurrent Steam players. I didn't even know it was out. But if anything, there is now this narrative that is being pushed, and it is being backed by the numbers, at least as far as how it's being shown, that these Sony PlayStation games are not off to great starts. But once again, it's the same argument when they made this argument with like the Lost Legacy collection of Uncharted, is that this Sackboy game, I don't even know if this is the first Sackboy game, but it is still a far lower tier game compared to God of War and Spider-Man and Horizon. So yeah, it's no surprise that you have Horizon Zero Dawn here, and then you have nearly half as many sales for Days Gone, and nearly half as many sales for even Uncharted. And I feel like these numbers in particular are probably not being fairly accounted for, because this game may only be out today or have been out for a couple days. So you really should give it a week or two. I guess I was wrong. Like, I also didn't accomplish my goal there, so I guess I should probably play casual. But yeah, that was definitely an example of my Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck not succeeding against Flowander deck. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a veteran Resident Evil producer, of which I think you have to probably say there's probably at least 2 or 3 of them, because they kept jumping around and having different people make Resident Evil games. There's never been any kind of consistent person behind it as far as a concept. Alright, let's see if this works a little bit better this time. That may also have just been a bad draw. Like, noticeably there really is no protection against people countering several of your concepts. I guess in this version, probably want this. And then this. And then I'm gonna end with the one that can destroy cards that are face up. But there is definitely a decent argument to end it with the other guy, the Warbow, who can attack directly even if there's somebody blocking your way. And oh, do that, go here, special summon Zeus. I probably shouldn't have put this face down as a trap card. There's no value in having it face down. I don't have the right cards to special summon something. Yeah. So Hiroyuki Kobayashi is leading a new NetEase game studio. GP Track 50 plans to create original games that can be adapted to other entertainment mediums, which is to say we want to make video games to sell as movies or anime. They're saying novels and manga, which so far we haven't really seen any real success there, in which a video game is turned into a novel or a manga. Films, there's been a little bit of success there, but a lot of that success has literally been from the case of Sony Entertainment Interactive making movies and licensing movies for Sony Pictures. And that's a different situation, certainly. Like, Sony Pictures would not have made the Uncharted movie if they had to pay a realistic license for the Uncharted license or intellectual property. Well, I'll be darned, that trap card may have worked. I'm playing against a very weird deck here that I don't recognize. The story continues to say Kobayashi first revealed in August that he had left Capcom after 27 years to join NetEase, which is China's second largest company. Joining a Chinese company as a Japanese person seems to be kind of crazy. and kind of desperate, but it might also be an indication of where they are going with Capcom and Resident Evil, in that they're allowing more of Resident Evil to be made by the Western teams, which those tend to be, in my opinion, the better Resident Evil games, and the Japanese teams seem to be getting sidelined. Of course, you run into the same argument and same problem with NetEase and Tencent, once again, of just the Chinese government really not going to do anything to allow, not even help, but just allow a Chinese company that makes video games to be successful. And that is going to create an issue. Over and over again, it's going to create an issue. Guess we could take this. I guess we could summon this. Then we'll see if we can do this. Bring out another one of these guys. There we won. And see, I can't take that as particularly a success either, because that deck was so weird anyways. So, since we're already down the path of trying to see if the Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck works better for me, for my playstyle, I'm gonna have to just keep going down that path and keep trying. Let's see, PlayStation 5 hits 25 million, but Sony's gaming profits fall 49% due to rising costs. So yeah. If anything, Sony might have been better off just having the PlayStation 5 always be very hard to get and try and push more people to buying PS4s. Even though nobody is doing that. I think both the Xbox Series X, Series S, and PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, I think they all shot themselves in the foot to compete against each other. Now that there is an economic downturn, they are really suffering from the expensive cost of selling the hardware at a loss. And it's not going to be possible to raise the next generation of consoles up another $100 in the next 2 or 3 years. So now they have to try and push for a long life amongst the PlayStation 5 and Series X that they last a lot longer. The good news is there probably isn't any new technology that's worthwhile to squeeze into a PlayStation 6 or whatever the next Xbox would be called. But yeah, they should have stretched things out a little bit more and not been so overly competitive. Meanwhile, Nintendo is eating the lunch of both of them, because I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo is actually profiting on the sale of every Switch and doesn't even really care about software sales that much. And Xbox has a much better argument, I would say, if they were to come out with a new generation in the next couple of years, to say that we will only sell this hardware to people who finance via an Xbox Season Pass, so that they're going to get these recurring fees. But that is definitely a dangerous perspective too, that there would be potentially repossessions, repo men coming to the house saying, "Give us back this Xbox, your credit card um, bounced this month. Yeah. And certainly the idea of financing and just putting people in debt, I don't think that is as profitable as it may have been in the past either. And again, that's just a really weird deck. I almost wonder if it isn't a case that you're getting put in different pools based on the deck you're playing. So if I stick with playing the Zodiac Tri-Brigade and it puts me in a different pool of players that causes me to win more, then shouldn't I just stick with that, even if it isn't the top tier meta deck to play? If it works, I suppose. Video Games Chronicle says Modern Warfare 2 is reportedly the fastest selling Call of Duty game ever. Remember, we are getting a barrage of Modern Warfare 2 articles from Video Games Chronicles. They almost certainly are getting paid to promote it and write a bunch of articles about it, and not really disclosing that. If that's not the case, then they are just trying for a massive push of kind of clickbait articles. But even if they were trying for a massive push, having 2-3 articles in the same day around Modern Warfare is kind of crazy. It's been claimed that the EU is set to investigate the Microsoft Activision deal in more depth. Microsoft reportedly didn't propose any comments triggering the new propose any commitments triggering the new probe. Which, yeah, whatever. I mean, they really are stretching out the story based on no real evidence. Why would you propose any commitments? All of this is really probably happening in backroom discussions. And I really still just question what part of Activision Blizzard is even under the authority of the European Union that they could stop the merger. It seems like any country that says no to the merger would potentially lose just that one company. So maybe Xbox and Microsoft got Activision and Blizzard, but they didn't get King because King is in the European Union. But I'm fairly certain Activision and Blizzard are both inside the United States. And who knows what kind of shenanigans you can do legally, even as far as selling the intellectual property that King owns, like selling Candy Crush to Activision and transferring it all over to the American company, leaving just a shell company of King in the European Union. Well, let's say Blizzard actually is in the European Union, which I don't think they are, but maybe. Who's to say you couldn't sell all the Blizzard intellectual properties and to Activision? It's all just so above the heads of most people, including myself, as far as what kind of ridiculous should be illegal but aren't illegal shenanigans you can pull off as a company. I don't think the European Union is as free or even really focused enough on a merger between companies to care that they would try to punitively punish Microsoft and stop Activision Blizzard products from being sold. In the European Union, even if they were able to bypass any kind of ruling that the European Union might make, but very well may not make. Like, at the end of the day, Microsoft is providing a lot of Windows licenses and like a lot of software to the European Union that really just couldn't go away if Microsoft wanted to go all out war with the European Union over this merger. Yeah, I could see a scenario that if the European Union tried to play hardball, Microsoft would just say, you know what, you screwed us on the merger, so we're gonna screw you on the licensing fees for all your government agencies next time they need to upgrade Windows, and we'll just make it up on the back end that way. Yep. Well, anyways, suffice it to say, every time I see an article like this, I say the same thing, that I severely doubt it's not going to go through. I guess I am playing at the moment for success, not so much for special summoning, but this deck special summons anyways. Yeah, I would assume his only hope here is that this trap card would have done something. But nope. He's done. I suppose there is a slight value in just getting up the rank as fast as possible, as early as possible. That gives you the opportunity to spend the rest of the month either not worrying about it or trying to go up to another rank. Like, theoretically, if I could get all the way up to platinum in the first week and then spend the rest of the month working towards diamond, or if I even got all the way up to diamond 1, like, that leaves a lot of stress, and it creates a situation where then you're just doing daily quests. You may not even need to play ranked if you're at like diamond 1. You might be better off just leaving it at diamond rank, diamond 1, and then playing casual for the daily quests. Like, there really isn't any benefit after you get to diamond 1 to continue to play. You should just retire for the whole week, the rest of the month. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says The Last of Us TV show release date has seemingly been revealed early by the HBO app. Later. So what's the release date of January 15th, 2023? That could be a placeholder date, but it kind of doesn't matter one way or the other. PlayStation Plus has lost nearly 2 million subscribers since its revamp, but Sony's network services revenue is up, says the chief financial officer. It expects to recover subscribers next quarter. If they were going to try to do what effectively would be a financing scheme around the next Xbox, where you have to have Xbox Games Pass Ultimate to even be able to use the device. They could remotely shut down things every month you're not paying. The credit card doesn't go through and you're not paying for that, certainly. But the danger there is that shutting down the device is not enough. If you give somebody a $500 device and then 3 months into that they've only paid for, say, $120 worth of subscription fees, and then you shut it down and then they just straight up try to hack it or just don't use it, you're still out that money. It really would have to get down to a situation where they're sending repo men, and repo men really don't act anywhere as much as you might think. They repossess big things like cars, and then if you're trying to repossess a house, that's a whole other nightmare scenario that you really wouldn't send a repo man to repossess a house. But the equivalent would be desktops and computers, and yeah, they don't tend to send actual repo men to go back and get desktops or computers from people. They instead just try to in-debt people. Right. Guess you send this to the graveyard. Add this to the hand. And I'm just gonna hope this works. It's probably very premature to be doing this. Alright, we need to attack. See what happens here. Nothing. 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 I don't think I even went through the full cycle as far as summoning that guy. Which, that was a mistake. A mistake I could have corrected there, but I didn't. We'll go ahead and summon this. I woke up today with my thumb being particularly arthritic. No real reason for that, as far as I can tell. That is kind of problem, is just the humidity, the weather, whatever seems to affect how my hands hurt. Yeah, the PlayStation Plus revamp, to say the least, has not sounded particularly interesting or particularly good. I don't think they were really thinking. This is barely even a story. Disney Dreamlight Valley latest updates improves Xbox performances and fixes bugs. I'm still not really at a level where I feel like maybe I should have activated this ability. Activating this ability now is probably stupid, because if it is a counter ability, it's gonna counter something else. So I guess the question here is, can we win in the next turn? Probably. Hideo Kojima has revealed another actor for the game. Shiori Kutsuna joins Eli Fanning, I believe that's, or Ellie Fanning, on the new project. So yeah. The fact that they're announcing face actors and as a major focus really, I think, just highlights that he is going to do a game that is very similar to Death Stranding in the fact that it is going to be about celebrities showing off their faces at a certain level in very high visuals. There doesn't so far seem to be a focus, any high chance of there being a focus of better gameplay mechanics. And while the story will probably be your standard crazy story that you get from him, I don't think that inherently is going to mean that it's going to be a good story. I wouldn't really try and make the argument that Death Stranding's story was particularly good. It was just crazy. And while crazy can be fun, it doesn't tend to leave as lasting of an impression as you would like. Like, crazy stories are fun to talk about in the short term, but you don't go back and talk about them in the long term. Or if you do talk about them in the long term, it is in some retrospective coverage that not that many people are focusing on. I'm thinking like the podcast How Did This Get Made, where they talk about really bad old movies, and that's kind of fun to listen to an episode around that. But then after listening to a certain one of those podcast episodes, I really don't remember these events of that story, nor do I really have a desire to go and actually watch those bad movies. Let's see. Here's an interesting story, at least it interests me, as perhaps more of a digital pervert than I should be. Sega had a lost erotic full motion video thriller, and it has been found and shared online 25 years later. It's called The Sacred Pools Prototype. It can now be played on the Saturn, PlayStation, and PC. There definitely were adult full motion videos for the Sega CD, and I assume that's what this was. Full motion video was definitely getting pushed on the Sega. Sega does what Nintendo don't here. That being said, I've never heard of something that was lost. It was an adult game. It was obviously a prototype, so it never got anywhere. There is Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, which is a really awful full motion video kind of porn thing, but even in that, I don't know if it was even softcore in the category of porn. You have to remember certainly that these would have been games that would have been released in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or probably 80s. So they're not going to really be that explicit. And frankly, they're almost certainly going to be way miles away from, say, an equivalent porn video like Debbie Does Dallas, which even those aren't that explicit by modern standards, and they definitely aren't hardcore. So what you could probably imagine for this prototype, if it even got that far, is that you would see some naked topless ladies, and that's about it. Now, Video Games Chronicle here is instead showing me a video of Sonic Frontiers. So, first, here's a video. So, to stay YouTube family friendly, I will play this off screen and describe it as 6 minutes and 54 seconds, so I'm going to have to skip around. It was a Sega Saturn game, not a Sega CD game, which I find that slightly interesting, but that is going to inherently also limit the amount of footage anything can have. So, yeah. Digital Content Corporation involved in the creation. Touch TV production. Another company I don't recognize. They're showing a CG of an asteroid hitting Earth at the beginning here for the Sacred Pools. There is definitely an alternate reality where porn via game consoles could have worked, because that would be within the history of people buying beta cassette players or VHS tape players to feed their own like desire to see porn in homes. People were even buying like 8mm projectors and reel-to-reel projectors even before that. And all of those were very expensive, and consoles were very expensive, so it would have been cheaper potentially if there would have been a situation where consoles became more like computers that could just do everything. But that concept just was too early. They're now showing me like CGs of an alien spaceship. So there's a blonde girl here. I'll risk it and show her very quickly. This is the first full motion video that they started with. And yeah, she's in slightly above the knee skirt, and a little strip of her belly is showing, which at the time that might have been a little bit lewd, but by modern standards it is nothing. Now we're seeing a guy character that's fully clothed, and so he's going to be probably a support character. Part of the problem certainly around these full motion video experiences is that they really have to lead you around the nose, and they really have to stretch what they can do and repeat things. It walked you to like some kind of computer interface terminal, and there's a big blue face on it. They're getting to the actual gameplay here, and it does seem like it's just a little puzzle. They just showed possibly a bad girl kicking you in the face because you walked down the wrong path and your life bar went lower, and then you found a closet. They found a closet with some kind of healing herb type thing. So it seems like you're going to wander around this spaceship set. So far, I am not really seeing any real nudity or even hinted that there would be nudity in it. So being a prototype, now they're showing another girl who's in a long white flowing dress with a mask over her face, a white cloth mask. Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if the nudity was thrown in originally, and that there were a lot of games that would have thrown in the concept of nudity and then backed down from that idea in later productions and developments. So now I'm seeing an alien that has like razors fighting you. And then the blue face on the console apparently is talking. This is very much a prototype of a game. And not really a good game. Now some kind of alien zombie looking creature is attacking you. Yeah, very noticeably, we're near the end of the 6-minute trailer and I'm not seeing anything that would even hint at there being nudity, at least consistently. There's plenty of opportunity here where you could have had like 3-breasted aliens and a lot of cleavage, or you could have had them walking around topless. I've seen more aliens and guys in this game randomly popping up and attacking you than I've seen of either of the couple of female characters who would be interesting to see. And yeah, at the end of that 6 minutes, you just have please insert disc 2. The Video Games Chronicle is linking to what they call a lengthy article, which might be in some way throwing shade at themselves. The quote here is, "It's no more cheesy than the other FMV games Sega put out, like Night Trap, Wirehead, Surgical Strike." Yeah. So more than likely, like, you see just a couple scenes like this where somebody may be implied at nude. Like, I guess technically this person with this lady with her hair down may be topless, but you're not seeing anything. And the logo here is certainly obscuring any buttocks or genitalia you would see. So when you compare this to like a 2-piece bikini, which you might see on an average beach, you're not really seeing any more skin than that. And if anything, I guess that's probably a hint at just like there never really has been a real embracing of adult content, particularly on consoles, where it really had any chance to be of any level of quality. Had the Sega CD evolved into the PlayStation 2 being a DVD player, and then had DVD players been perhaps just a little bit earlier to the party where porn via DVD was a thing, we probably would have seen the PlayStation 2 be the playback device of choice for people who were buying porn. But that didn't happen because the porn industry didn't embrace DVDs quite fast enough. And by the time they did embrace DVDs, they had already, the internet already existed, and the internet just became a much better place. And even at that, had there been a browser that could browse porn via the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, or even the original Xbox 360, there might have been more of an embracing there too. But fairly quickly after that, then cell phones with browsers became prevalent enough. So yeah, it really was just a case that the whole industry had both like DVDs and porn and the internet, had 3 different industries all growing very fast there, not leaving enough of a gap that it would have been embraced. And that's definitely a different story, although not too different, from just adult games being a thing. And there is definitely a bigger question, certainly, is at what point does the game industry grow up and say, I'm not afraid of an adults only rating, I'm not afraid of not getting rated by the ESRB. PC gaming still feels like it's being held back as far as adult content because of the ESRB or because of just Steam's rules. We just don't have any kind of bold Hugh Hefner type people, or Larry Flint was the guy of Hustler. I'd say Larry Flint is probably even more bold as far as saying, I'm going to put out the dirtiest smut I can think of and go all the way to the Supreme Court to support it. I should probably watch that movie, The People versus Larry Flint, but like I know the general gist of it. But also, I doubt it would sell nowadays either. You probably wouldn't sell one more Xbox Series X or one more PlayStation 5 if you embraced adult games. So they've just painted their product as being for kids, even if it really isn't for kids. If anything, what I imagine could happen, and I'll stop rambling in a second here, with movie theaters having less and less movies to show, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a certain point where movie theaters just start going back to showing like unrated adult only pornos or unrated adult only cuts of movies. The problem with that potentially happening though is that it would have to be a non-AMC, not controlled by Disney movie theater. So I could imagine you have something like an Alamo Drafthouse type chain, but probably not Alamo Drafthouse specifically. And I don't think movie theaters really want to do that either, because porno movie theaters were gross in many different ways, and nobody really enjoyed the idea of running them. And I doubt they'd be very profitable. Let's see. Moving on, FIFA 23's World Cup reportedly won't have its own foot mode and will remove cards after the event. It's claimed a popular mode featured in 2014 and 2018 games won't return. I guess check out that article if you're interested. Video Games Chronicle says November's first wave of Xbox Game Pass titles have been revealed. We have a full list here. Legend of Tyrading, Walking Dead: A New Frontier, the complete season. Walking Dead Michonne, the complete season. Ghost Song, Football Manager 2023. Return to Monkey Island. Vampire Survivors. Penitent. I think that's what it says. Pentiment, maybe is the word, in Somerville. Those are a lot of games I don't recognize there. I mean, I have to say, I definitely don't recognize those games. Let's see if we can activate this. We probably can. So we'll summon that one, that one, that one, and that one, and then put all this. Yeah, at this point I'm doing so well I want to keep on playing, but I think it is probably smarter to call this the last game so we actually make some progress through the news. It is an interesting thought. If I had like a co-host, would that make these streams go a little bit longer? If these streams average 3 hours, could I go 6 hours with a co-host? Is it a direct equation like that? Probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised if I could go 5 hours with a co-host. Can't really do that, though. I'd have to find somebody I trust, somebody that would stick around for the long haul, and I don't know who would be crazy enough to do that. And I'd have to find somebody that worked well with me. And there's definitely diminishing returns. I've seen that if you have 4 people on a podcast, that is the absolute maximum, and probably one person too many. Because they start talking over each other and they start dragging the discussion in different ways. Giant Bomb really never had that problem because there really was only 1 or 2 people talking and everybody else was just kind of sitting around the table saying nothing in their podcasts. But in most other cases, that was not the situation. So yeah, you want to get 2 or 3 at most people around the table, and actually being around the table is very beneficial. Versus like talking through a Skype presentation. Moving on, Vampire Survivors coming to Xbox this month and will be on Game Pass. So I guess the reason why I didn't recognize this game is that it's brand new. And if this video wants to actually load, these Video Game Chronicle articles are very weird. Yeah, looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter experience. Nothing of any real interest at all there. Let's see. Modern Warfare 2 launches franchise sales record, Activision claims. So that's our second Modern Warfare 2 article for today from Video Games Chronicle. FIFA 23's World Cup mode release date has been confirmed. Details revealed. What's the release date? November 9th. Or November 8th on mobile. Let's see, can I do anything else here? Let's just do a direct attack and do no damage and then end the turn, I guess. He did something to my characters to At least this character to make his attack 0. God of War Ragnarok Deep Dive video covers characters and character creation and creature creation, which I don't know if that's particularly that important for God of War Ragnarok. Yes, there will be some characters and yes, it's nice if they look good, but unless you're talking a game where you can customize the look of your character, which won't be the case in God of War Ragnarok, almost certainly, there's kind of no reason to talk about that. It's really just kind of bragging as far as look at what we can create. Alright, well. Go ahead and summon this, I guess. Activate this. So is that going to counter this ability, or is that going to do something else? Alright, well. There we go on that, there we go on that. Do we now dare to summon something else? I think you kind of do. The problem with that, that's not going to work. Best case scenario is that you're going to have to summon a level 2 character using this and this. And by putting those two in the graveyard, I guess that maybe helps me. I most definitely do not want to see a situation where every AAA game or every game in general tries to make more news by talking about their character creation concepts or methods. That is news that I imagine should get out there, but it's news that should be on a blog somewhere and not overly emphasized. I'm just gonna cross my fingers and hope that right. Can't do anything else, but I think I'm fine. November's quote free games with Amazon are now available to claim. Let's see. Fallout New Vegas Ultimate Edition, War Rally Championship 9, FIFA World Rally Championship, or FIA, FIA World Rally Championship, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which the artwork for this is, it's a little shocking that that artwork is even scanned, frankly. That is something I imagine new generations will kind of not even realize, is that there were these big cardboard boxes in the old days, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I know I had it, and I may still have it sitting around somewhere. But yeah, there was big cardboard boxes which had CDs or floppy disks in them that had artwork all around them, and that kind of box art is more than likely completely lost these days. Or maybe more people do have high resolution scans of those box arts somewhere. One would hope that that is the case. And see, yeah, I really would just prefer to ride the wave of success here and keep on playing up to gold tier 5, but I think is more than smart to just call it a day here. We've done all the daily quests except for the solo mode stuff. We've also normal summoned 3,000 lifetime monsters. So that's one more lifetime thing that is done and gone forever. Yeah, fairly quickly I am going to just fill out the last bits of these lifetime ones. And then at that point there will be no help at all for getting gems. And except for daily quests and login quests. I do feel like getting 20 gems for login quests is higher than what it used to be, so maybe they have improved on that. And apparently I've already done the spectate. So let's celebrate our victory there by opening 10 packs, and we may even open 10 packs later on. It still makes a lot of sense to go ahead and open the 10 packs of these legacy packs, and we're still getting new cards, extra cards. I guess an interesting question to ask here. And yeah, after seeing all that success, Zodiac Tri-Brigade is just back into the rotation. Flowander we may occasionally play, but I wouldn't be surprised if I don't play it much at all. It just never really was something I liked. I still need to spend some extra time too using up the crafting points and trying to get more crafting points. Alright, but yeah, we're gonna just focus on the news. It seems like Video Games Chronicle has an article for every single game that's going to be on Game Pass or Prime free games. Although in this case it's actually pointing out that Return to Monkey Island is also coming to the PlayStation 5 next week. Which this was the Devolver Digital maybe remake. I don't think it was, though. I think Return to Monkey Island is the remake of the sequel. Or it may very well have been its own side game. Just yet another side game. I may not have even played this, come to think of it. Months after it was purchased, Hitman Go's studio Onoma is being shut down. The developer was formerly known as Square Enix Montreal, and it was purchased by the Embracer Group, which that really smacks in the face of calling your company the Embracer Group when you embrace something to death like this. Now, inherently, I could see Embracer Group starting to realize that they've spent a lot of money acquiring a lot of companies and they haven't put out a lot of games, and I don't think even some of their best games that should have been their best games are really that great. I played Darksiders 3, for instance. That should have been an amazingly great game, and it was just a mediocre game. So focusing in on a mobile company that made Hitman Go isn't the right move. So shutting them down isn't the worst idea. Also, I would say this company very possibly has not done anything lately. Hitman Go is several years old, and Lara Croft Go, same idea. And making another Hitman Go, another Lara Croft Go game doesn't make sense in the future. Like, mobile games don't have to be as simplistic as a board game turned into a digital game, which is basically all Hitman Go and Lara Croft Go was. A board game or a puzzle game. So yeah. If anything, it might be better for Embracer Group if they shut down a couple more companies in the next couple weeks and say, you know what, this isn't working. We need to merge some people. We need to lay some people off. We've got the properties and the titles and the IP. Let's focus on the good games that will sell, and let's cut some of the fat. Also, a new Deus Ex game is reportedly in early development at Eidos Montreal, which Eidos Montreal, is that also part of the Embracer Group? Yes. So, yeah. Decisions clearly have been made. There was a board meeting and at some point, and the people making the decisions made some decisions to say, let's focus on a Deus Ex game, which totally makes sense. And let's not focus on Hitman Go and mobile games. So yeah, maybe if they hadn't acquired Eidos and the Deus Ex series, then the Hitman Go team would have had more of a chance of surviving. But yeah, clearly Hitman Go became so low priority. Let's see, moving on. Following a record launch, EA claims that FIFA 23 sales are up 10% on last year's games, which, okay, take that for whatever that means. EA has high hopes for Koei Tecmo's incredible monster hunting game Wild Hearts, which, yeah, they are putting a lot of effort and promotion on Wild Hearts for a game that was just announced. Yeah. EA having high hopes probably isn't a good thing. Also, let's just face it, while EA may own the rights to a lot of good games, they haven't made good games or released good games in many, many years. So it would be surprising if this becomes a success. Also, it's weird that it's EA and Koei Tecmo. Who's really making this game and who's publishing it? It's going to be published by the EA Originals publishing branch, and it's being developed by Omega Force, a division of Koei Tecmo, best known for the Dynasty Warriors series and experience. So you'd almost assume that it's going to play a lot like a Warriors game where you're going to button mash like crazy, and I don't know if that really is going to succeed in a Western published game. If anything, this really does spell disaster. Some relatively unknown division of Koei Tecmo, which Koei Tecmo themselves not really known for making a bunch of great games, is making a new IP, and then Koei Tecmo themselves aren't even willing to fund it and publish it. So then it's being published by EA Originals, which is a subsidiary of EA. That sounds like more of a recipe for failure than success. The Game Everywhere's developer Build a Rocket Boy is opening a Montpelier studio. The former GTA boss Leslie Benzies company will still be headquartered in Edinburgh. I don't know what Everywhere is. That's the part that confuses me. Once again, these videos, they're so weird. It's not like there's a button to click or anything. It's just like it loads in blackness until it's ready to play. Alright, everywhere looks like a game that is just showing a whole bunch of scenes and no actual gameplay. And then as soon as you start to see some potential running and gunning, the screen zooms away. Like you see these mostly in full screen, and then as soon as you start to see people, it starts to move faster and it starts to move away. Yeah, everywhere's got some racing in it and some running and gunning Fortnite type stuff. It almost certainly is trying to be something like a Fortnite clone. Yeah, nothing there. Moving on, Apple is reportedly hiring game developers for its augmented reality VR push. It's long been claimed that Apple is preparing its own headset. Yeah, I suppose that would be interesting, but it may very well be too late. And at what point was this Apple's logo? Because this looks like a totally made up fictional logo. Let's say they do start to sell VR headsets like iPhones at Apple stores, and everybody can get them because they're fairly cheap and they're fairly dumbed down. Has Apple ever been good at gaming? Not really. So they'd have to make a big change there. Does iTunes, as far as video and music, make sense in a VR headset? Not really. Are you going to potentially push musicians or actors to make content for a VR headset? Probably not. Like the whole thing falls apart. I wouldn't be surprised if some kind of augmented reality glasses came out and they looked nothing like a VR headset, but then they were also fairly underpowered because of that. But yeah, I don't think Apple is going to succeed in bringing VR to the masses in the same way that the iPhone succeeded in bringing smartphones to the masses. But that's frankly just an opinion. I can't really back it up with any facts. Moving on, Microsoft is investing in the Korean blockchain game company. WeMade also works with the MIR series of MMO games. Yeah. We'd kind of already heard this, that Microsoft wants to have an Asian success or an Asian type game. The question, certainly from a Westerner's perspective, is the question, are any of the Korean, Chinese, Japanese MMO mobile games actually successful, or do they just seem like they're successful? And would they be successful brought worldwide, or would they just be terrible? Because most of the Korean, Chinese, even Japanese MMO games look awful, and they have tons of microtransactions that are way more expensive. And so yeah, and the whole blockchain aspect on that is also just a nightmare. There was a blockchain company I just heard about that went into bankruptcy, and as part of the legal filings of going in bankruptcy, listed every single person's identification number as far as the transactions they were doing on the blockchain. So the whole selling point of the blockchain being potentially anonymized and it being an untraceable transaction was literally thrown out the window because there was a single company that was controlling and monitoring everything, which a lot of blockchain concepts are around that, where there is this king at the top, whether it's a company or somebody who has already mined a bunch of blockchain currency tokens. Yeah, there really would be only, like, Ethereum and Bitcoin would be the only two blockchains that I would even begin to think about using, and I still don't think I can think of a legitimate reason why I would use either one of those. Um, I guess if people wanted to donate to me in Ethereum and Bitcoins, that's about the only reason I would think of doing that. It's been confirmed apparently that the PlayStation VR 2 will be released in February for $550 or £530, which, yeah, the value of the pound is really, really down. February 22nd. 11 new PlayStation 2 VR 2 games have been confirmed, 9 of which are on other formats. The exclusives include a Dark Pictures roller coaster spin-off. Let's see. So Dark Pictures Switchback VR. And then Crossfire Serena, Sierra Squad, Light Brigade, Cities VR, Cosmonois High, Hello Neighbor Search and Rescue. That whole Hello Neighbor series, I guess, has just been forgotten at this point. Jurassic World Aftermath Collection, Pistol Whip VR, Zenith Last City. Yeah, you know, a VR game where you're pistol whipping somebody is probably not a great seller, or not one to be promoted. And then After the Fall and Tentacular. Yeah, I don't recognize any of those games at all. And that's hardly sounds like the kind of lineup you would want to try and promote the VR2. Now, noticeably, maybe the VR2 fails miserably, and by that comparison, the Apple VR succeeds in the small pond that is virtual reality. But yeah, part of the problem certainly with Apple doing the VR thing is that Apple VR almost seems like it needs to be related to offices and working, where it could be justified that a business would spend the money to get a VR headset, and iPhones and Apple products in the office have just never really succeeded or worked well. And that's just another avenue in which Apple could have succeeded better. I could see a company like a hospital saying, you know what, all these nurses and doctors, they love Apple, they love things simple, let's get rid of the Windows nonsense. All of our software is older than dirt anyways on Windows, and let's put some VR headsets on them so that they can see where they're supposed to cut during surgery, or just so that they could constantly look up patients' records or add to patients' records. Although, honestly, if I was going to build a hospital, I would have the hospital, just every hospital room would potentially have a camera, or 2 or 3 or 4 in every room, since money really is no object. And you would just be constantly taking full video footage and recording the audio, and then you would just have a stenography pool, for lack of a better term, that is just taking notes and adding to the patient's records as the interactive doctors and nurses are actually providing the treatment, and try to, as best as possible, split documentation and record keeping from actual palliative treatment that you're giving to people, or treatment in general. I think palliative's the wrong word there, come to think of it. Moving on, back to video games. A new trademarks have been filed for the horror game from Suda51 and Swery65. The pair first announced plans for a horror game titled Hotel Barcelona in 2019, and I guess if they're putting out new trademarks, then they're still working on it. Now, Suda51 made the No More Heroes series, or the guy in charge of that, and that gameplay is alright, whereas Swery made the what was this one called? Deadly Premonition series, where the gameplay in that is pretty awful. So you have two kind of uniquely weird storytellers, neither which of one are actually good at making gameplay mechanics. So between that, Hotel Barcelona more than likely will be a very spooky and weird horror story with very little gameplay. But since they are both giants in their fields, it might work pretty well. Although it is kind of fairly worth mentioning that Deadly Premonition 2 was not very well received at all, so Swery is kind of on the downswing, and No More Heroes had that bad spin-off game when they tried to have a different gameplay mechanic. And yeah, these are definitely two niche creators working together when perhaps niche creators in particular shouldn't work together, and they should just both be making their own horror games instead of working together. There is a real danger that these two people get in the same room and then they just start loving each other's ideas so much that it becomes a just love fest, and that what they actually create is actually garbage, but they can't see it because they feed off their weird energy so much that it makes sense to them. Whereas very often I would say Suda51 and Swery65, although Swery65, I've never heard of him referred to as Swery65. I've only heard of him referred to as Swery. But yeah, it's very possible that these avant-garde artist types need anchors, need other employees to say, okay, we like your crazy idea, we'll implement your crazy idea, but we need to put some actual gameplay in here, and we need to anchor this to reality, and we need to not go too crazy. And particularly for Swery's, the Deadly Premonition series really is just based off of the insanity of the Twin Peaks series. So if he's going to implement his own ideas finally, instead of just parroting Twin Peaks, we really don't know what that looks like. Although in all fairness, half of the Control series was just parroting SCP, and the Alan Wake series was parroting either I don't think really it was parroting Twin Peaks as much as it was parroting Stephen King novels. So games definitely have succeeded in just ripping off ideas or parroting ideas, whatever you want to call it. Moving on, HBO has confirmed that The Last of Us TV show will premiere in January. Football Manager 2023 PS5 version has suffered a last-minute delay, if you're interested in that. The first Mario & Rabbids Sparks of Hope DLC requires the game's Season Pass. Ubisoft plans to release 3 add-ons for the game in 2023. Which, yeah, at a certain point, that's where this was going to go, and I don't think anybody should be particularly surprised that once they threw out the idea of charging you extra for DLC, and then they threw out the idea of it'll be cheaper if you buy 3 or 4 pieces of DLC via Season Pass, eventually any savings that you might have gotten from buying a Season Pass will go away, and then DLC will only be in the Season Pass, and then the Season Passes will almost certainly increase in price. It's always just bait and switch. Can we change the playfield? Can we trick people into spending more money? And Ubisoft is, I'd say, one of the worst perpetrators of that. And we have totally lost the field or lost the war as far as saying, I'm not buying any game with a Season Pass, even if I'm not buying the Season Pass, or moving the goalpost and saying I'm not buying the Season Pass, but I'll buy the game. Like, nobody really is in the position these days where they could say that and they could actually surmount a boycott. So, and if boycotts really don't work and bullying does, maybe the right move is for people to just hate on Ubisoft on Twitter for season pass nonsense and DLC nonsense. Like, but that probably wouldn't work either. And then we have either our third or fourth Modern Warfare 2 articles saying Modern Warfare 2 will be adding ranked play in 2023. Now, notably, let's see, now that we're on the Gamatsu articles, how many Modern Warfare 2 stories we see today in comparison. And GameDeveloper.com also. Because if we see none, which is the number I would bet on, that does really highlight a difference. Ruby Arrowfell launches November 15th. I think we'd already talked about that. Netflix acquiring Spy Fox we acquired. NetEase Games establishing GPT Track 50, which is an Osaka-based studio led by the former Capcom producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi. That makes a lot more sense now, as the headline explains it. He is known for Sengoku Basara, which is a game I do not recognize. But yeah, if it is a case where NetEase, as a Chinese company, has said, hey, let's form a Japanese office and do like Tencent and try to get out of China, it makes a lot more sense than what I was expecting was the case, that they were going to literally have him either work remotely or move to China and run an office out of China in NetEase. You can tell, interesting as they're showing off this office, the amount of space a Japanese office is going to be ridiculously small. Actually, the technology here so far looks very modern. No fax machine to be seen. Fairly big meeting room, but yeah, you're not going to have a team of 30 all in this room at the same time. But you could very easily have a decent amount. This is incredibly modern for a Japanese office to have any kind of meeting room or sofa room at all. And showing off an office like that really does establish that this is a different type of way of doing business. Now, noticeably here, what isn't shown is any kind of desks at all. There's no desks that people could sleep under. There's no computers. So this may really be a collection of meeting rooms where they meet together on a weekly basis, and then they're mostly working out of their homes. Japanese working out of their homes would be a little crazy too, though. That would be very, very different. I wonder if I actually watch this. It's a 14-second thing. So we're seeing a whole bunch of languages, definitely focusing globally, but nothing else. Yeah. This definitely feels like a different way to build an office in the highlight. The only thing you see here is just this little tablet. That seems odd. Noticeably, there's like no tea stations, no water fountains, nothing has been installed like this. This is brand new carpet, brand new furniture, certainly. But yeah, there's nothing on these shelves as far as awards or drinks or snacks. I would be very interested in seeing what this studio looks like when it actually gets people in it. But as a small Japanese company funded by NetEase, I imagine it will eventually boil down to a few people working very, very hard to make video games, sleeping under their desks, doing a lot of the things that Japanese companies in the past have done. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fax machine that gets added. I wouldn't be surprised if the computers that get added look really old. Moving on, Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrongs Forgotten Demo for the PS4 and 5 launches November 2nd in Japan. Blue Reflection Sun launches this winter in Japan. A closed beta test is set for December 2nd to the 9th. It's going to be released on PC and smartphone. I didn't really expect there to be a new Blue Reflection game released this quickly, but it does seem like they are trying to make the Blue Reflection series more of a series, both in Japan and worldwide. As I understand it, the Blue Reflection series is a Japanese isekai, another world RPG game with kind of the slightly unique twist in that it was like an all-girls collection of friends that are the main protagonist, and I don't know if there are any male characters at all in the Blue Reflection series. I think they have some kind of ability to transform into other kinds of creatures. The Blue Reflection series has caught my eye in the past, but it's going to probably be one of those games that if it becomes a big thing, it'll be a big thing by the time it's at its third, fourth, or fifth game in its series, much like the Persona series, and then at that point it becomes a little overwhelming to say, hey, let's play all the Blue Reflection games now that this is big and popular. A Korean studio called Ikina Games announces a turn-based RPG called the Starbites Taste of Dessert for PC. Yeah. In the same way, yeah, this could be the first game of a series that becomes super popular, but the odds of that are very low, and trying to play a game on the ground floor hoping that it becomes very popular is not the way to do business as a YouTube content creator. I would play this game just because it looks interesting, and a PC Korean game alone is kind of a unique concept. It's very blurry as far as the focus, and the art style as far as the characters are different even by Korean art style. So yeah, there could be something to this. It's due out in August of 2023, so hopefully I remember it at that point. PlayStation 5's shipments have topped 25 million sales. We'll leave that article at that. God of War 2018 sales have topped 23 million, which doesn't that mean that there's more God of War sales than there are PlayStation 5 sales? I guess that's probably because it's also on Steam and Epic Games Store. Didn't even realize that the God of War game got even this bloody. Of course, I guess I could go on to a rant as far as the God of War series of originally having the sex minigames, and the sex has now been removed and replaced with blood and gore. Standard United States policy. We love blood and gore. We hate any nudity or sex. Famitsu review scores issue 1770, and by we I mean United Statesians, not me personally. Let's see, we have Hokonnawa Bakojo Hitsuji Mura getting 25 out of 40, so that must be an absolute garbage Switch game. Harvestelia for the Switch getting 31 out of 40, which isn't particularly good. And then Star Ocean Divine Force getting a 35 out of 40, which is pretty high. And almost certainly this is from Star Ocean. Not a lot of games released, but 3 is about the right amount. It usually is the amount that gets reviewed by Famitsu. I think it probably does point out something too. I would have to do some research, but I heavily suspect that the person giving this first 9 is the same person giving this 8 and this 7, which is to say that there are 4 reviewers at Famitsu who every week are playing, hopefully all the way through to the end, 3 or 4 different games. Which, that's a lot of work, certainly, as a YouTuber who doesn't really successfully beat even one game on the week. Worst case scenario, I guess there might be 12 reviewers, each playing an entire game in a week. In fact, actually, I guess there could be a lot more. There could be an infinite number of reviewers, and they could be playing a game over the course of multiple weeks. But yeah, the point I was trying to make, and maybe I undercut my own point there, is I don't see anybody else putting in that effort to actually play games and give them reviews as much as Famitsu does. Famitsu really puts in the work and really does a great service for actually giving reviews that actually are helpful to some level. Although even their reviews aren't particularly the most helpful, because almost everything ends up somewhere around 32 to 35. But most games are average, so I guess that makes sense. Moving on, we already talked about this character, this new face actor being announced. Let's see. God of War Ragnarok has an all parents can relate ad featuring Ben Stiller or John Travolta, LeBron James, and their kids. Which, yeah, I don't know if I care about an ad. I don't think I do. It does probably highlight some nonsense and a waste of funding to have such big names. In an ad. Apparently they're in a group therapy session. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but didn't John Travolta's have some public fight with their kids? Yeah. It's possible that each of these famous actors did have a public fight with their kids. It's possible that they've never had any kind of public fight with their kids. But yeah, having even one celebrity in a God of War ad is really focusing away from the God of War game. And yeah, who are you trying to really sell God of War Ragnarok to in this case? People who like Ben Stiller or John Travolta or LeBron James? Really, really old people? That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a waste of money. We already talked about the Xbox Game Pass games, so we won't go through that list again. Vampire Survivors we already found out about and immediately lost interest. Sonic Frontiers has a prologue called Divergence, which is an animated short. It's a 6-minute Knuckles the Echidna story. I guess if you want to check that out. One of these videos looks considerably better lit than the other, so I don't know why the English version here looks way better than the thumbnail of the Japanese version. Man, I'm losing momentum here. Let's move on. I definitely wouldn't spend the time to watch that. Team 17 is going to publish Absolutely Games developed historical strategy title for consoles and PC. Team 17 has tried to be a publisher for a while now. We've still yet to see them actually succeed at being a good publisher, in my opinion, or publish anything big enough for it to even be able to be measured. Return to Monkey Island coming to PS5 and Xbox Series on November 8th. That's a better way of putting out 2 bits of news instead of having 2 separate articles. The God of War behind the scenes, I'm still not interested in. Bendy and the Dark Revival launches November 15th for PC, later for PlayStation and Xbox. So I guess this is a sequel to the previous Bendy game, which I may own that game, or it may just be on my wish list as far as the previous game. Now that there's a sequel, that maybe gives me a little bit more of a reason to want to play the first game. Although I'm not really looking to play horror games, even though I'm playing Darkest Dungeon right now. I wouldn't even really consider Darkest Dungeon much of a horror game. It'll be interesting to try and figure out what I want to do next October. I still probably will want to play 2, maybe even 3 games, 3 different time slots in October, where the rest of the year I'm really only doing 1 time slot of pre-recorded footage. Doraemon Story of Seasons Friends of the Great Kingdom launches, and DLC pack number 1 trailers are available. The launch trailer and the DLC pack trailer is what I should have said. Xbox Game Pass adds Dune Spice Wars coming soon, which I'm interested in what kind of game that is. It looks like it might be a real-time strategy, but it might really just be more like a board game strategy game. In a lot of ways, I imagine, though, that this, like everything Dune, is only going to really appeal to people who are big into Dune. Yep. There is this problem, and I was thinking about this yesterday, is just how many book series people get into that just become these little niche fandoms that never become a big thing that the general populace are into. Like, even in like DC Comics and Marvel Comics, where you have the Marvel movies succeeding fairly well to making some of the Marvel characters super popular, there's still probably hundreds if not thousands of other Marvel characters and stories that nobody has really heard of outside of comic book fans, and comic book fandom is still very much a niche idea. And yeah, books are very much that way, and movies not so much. Some TV shows definitely on the extended cable channels are very much like that. There's really less and less of an opportunity every day to have a shared common form in which people can enjoy the same things. Everybody has their own little corners of the internet, but even before the internet, there really was never much of a shared experience in the world, or even in the United States. Moving on, Salt and Sacrifice has a Shunned Namekeeper update now available with new NPCs, weapons, armor, and more. In a lot of ways, this is the exact thing I want to avoid, and why it took me so long to play Darkest Dungeon is that I don't want to play a game that is consistently adding more content, because then my reviews maybe don't make so much sense later on. I want to wait until a game is completely finished and polished, as much as it's going to be polished. Yeah, we already talked about this, but it is really strange that they a month ago rebranded it and then they shut it down, which maybe they rebranded it specifically just to make people think that they weren't shutting it down, Or maybe there was just a meeting a month later that said, well, this doesn't work financially. They really have been, Embracer Group has been throwing money around like crazy with no seemingly having no plan at all. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has an overview trailer and a Japanese TV commercial. I don't think there's really a need to watch either one of those. People into Pokemon are going to be still into Pokemon. Genshin Impact version 3.2 update is now available, which I guess Project Nikkei launching at the same time as a Genshin Impact update is going to be some competition there, and that probably will hurt Project Nikkei more than Genshin Impact, because I bet Genshin Impact players will not even ever heard of Project Nikkei. Harvestelia details Quietus Dungeon, Lunamancer job, cooking deliveries, Konolu dolls, whole bunch of words there, several of which I don't know what they mean. Just trying to move through the news here, and I'm back to my hand not wanting to move. And it really is just my hand being tired. It's not the mouse. I fixed my mouse by changing the bottom plastic part. Octopath Traveler 2, Partitio, and Oswald trailers are available. I guess I also have fixed my computer at this point. It is proven itself to be fixed as long as I don't turn on the TPM Trusted Platform module settings. It won't break RAM or do anything. I heard of Linux kernel updates. Hopefully it was just a beta that was literally breaking monitors or like physically breaking hardware. A bug had been introduced to do that on accident. Hopefully on accident. So yeah, I need to take an extra 5 minutes at some point and put the case back on the side of my computer and probably dust it out, and hopefully dusting it doesn't break it, and move on, because yeah, everything's been running. I've played multiple games. I've seen no micro stuttering. I've seen no issues, no lockups. There probably has been an occasional crash, but games crashing is not that crazy. Let's see. Moving on, The Forest of Drizzling Rain remake launches November 16th in Japan. I don't recognize this game, so it probably never came to the West. Kind of feels like it's a remake of something that could have been a very old visual novel or adventure game. I guess not so much a visual novel as a RPG Maker game. Apparently it's a horror game, which always a good bet to assume it's a horror game. Frontier Developments has acquired Complex Game, the studio behind Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. So there's an acquisition. What's funny about this is Gematsu generally does not report on the acquisitions of companies. Here is Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate Demon Hunters, which is oddly an actual good Warhammer game, which almost all of them are bad. Capcom sales update says Monster Hunter Rise is at 11.2 million, Devil May Cry 5 is at 6.1 million, and more. The way Capcom puts these information out is to always update the sales on all of their major franchises. And then you have to be careful too, certainly. Like Resident Evil 4 on GameCube selling 1.6 million really doesn't fully explain like the total sales of the different releases of Resident Evil 4 all added together. So you would definitely want a different list here to say the entire Resident Evil series has sold how many millions, or the entire versions of Resident Evil 4 have sold how many millions. And I imagine you wouldn't find any numbers here particularly too surprising, since all this information has been released before. And they are stopping at 110 as far as things that have sold 1 million. And so almost certainly Capcom has released plenty of games that didn't sell 1 million. Also, certainly you have to calculate what is 1.16 million sold in 1993 compared to 1.2 million sold in 2012. That's a big difference there. There's a much larger audience in 2012 for video games than in 1993. Atomic Heart launches February 21st in 2023, so I guess we have an official release date after Atomic Heart being very slow to come out and announcing itself, I think, nearly a year ago. Front Mission First Remake launches November 30th, which I guess this is some kind of strategy RPG game. I'll leave it at that. PlayStation VR 2 launches February 22nd, with 11 titles being announced. I guess we can see some packaging here. Is this a charging station for the VR Sense controllers? This shows us a screenshot and a video of each of the VR2 games, so at least I have a better idea of what they are. Light Brigade here. Let's see what that actually is. First person shooter in VR. Stand in one place and shoot, or be on tracks and shoot. Doesn't really look good compared to a first person shooter that you would get outside of VR. Let's see what Pistol Whip looks like. If you are just actively whipping people with a pistol. Like, undoubtedly, in VR you are going to need to figure out a way to make games where you are shooting people and moving, but I don't know if those kinds of games are going to sell a VR headset when all of the depictions we've seen of 2 games here are not very realistic images of people, or good graphics in general. Let's see what tentacular. Grabbing things and throwing things with tentacles. They all do really just feel like gimmick games or very short experiences. I think there is definitely a disconnect also between needing to make a game short because people will be physically exhausted when playing in VR, and perhaps a small desire to make shorter video games because you don't want to write as much, or you don't want to do as much level design or as much character design. I still feel like 30 minutes is kind of the experience you would want to do in VR for each session, and probably less than 5 hours would be your average experience in a VR game, whereas 5 to 10 hours is really where you would make a shorter video game that's not VR. Moving on, Destroy All Humans Clone Carnage has gone free to play, or 2 cents for PlayStation 4 users. I don't know why it's 2 cents. Although maybe it would make sense if all free-to-play games really did charge 2 cents or a nickel or dime. That would probably be better than the idea of having to give phone notifications to get rid of bots. If you said you have to pay a nickel, a dime, some insignificant amount of money, but it would require you to have a gift card or credit card on file. This game originally launched in May 31st for $12.99, so that's a big difference. That being said, it is also a multiplayer game, so it should have been free to play to begin with. Little Witch Nobedia for PS4 and Switch is coming to the West in spring of 2023. This is the Dark Souls meets Moe anime girl game that I'm still not sure is actually finished or is actually good. I think it probably is finished, and the fact that the image has 4 or 5 background characters, that does kind of imply to me that it's potentially selling itself a lot like a Dark Souls game because it's difficult, but it may not actually be difficult, or it may be selling itself like a Dark Souls game just because it's in a dark dungeon, which honestly in Dark Souls that's not even really the reason why a Dark Souls game is called a Dark Souls game. There are going to be obviously low-level monsters that are attacking. You can see now in this gameplay footage, which is the first time I've seen this footage, that there is a lot of dodging happening, and that is in line with a Dark Souls game. And there are big enemies you're fighting. This definitely is a game that evolved quite a bit in its development, because it really did just have this idea of, let's just take the joke idea of modding in a anime girl into Dark Souls or into a dungeon game, and they evolved it into an actual final product, which that is applaudable. So I guess at some point this did come out September 29th. How did I miss it? I probably didn't miss it. I probably just left it on the fall list too, to just see what the reviews are. You can see that overall the reviews are positive enough that this should be on the wish list. I would have to think of how I would justify playing this game though, because I'm not going to play Dark Souls. So if I own Dark Souls, Demon Souls or something, I could like spotlight each of these games and just come to the same conclusion that I wouldn't play it. And then it would be kind of a bait and switch, certainly, to say, what is the exclamation point? Off-topic review. Period. Interesting. So it's got a little asterisk. What was this off-topic review period? Let's see. It annoys the China bot, so it's definitely worth your want. Definitely worth your money. Minus 1,000 social credits, of course. So apparently, at some point, China or China's bots didn't like the game. Were there any negative reviews in English during this time? Let's see. Dodgy company. development is slow is probably accurate. Apparently there was some kind of Taiwanese collaboration, and that led to a flood of, like, this never even got reported on. I would have remembered this story if this got reported on, so that this must have not been that big of a deal. And honestly, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, because I'm seeing in that same time period very, very few negative reviews in any language. Well, actually, you have to click 9,000. Alright, that's a lot. That's a lot. I was expecting it to infinitely scroll. Alright, but yeah, at a certain point, that controversy wasn't even big enough to make it to the West. So that doesn't change my opinion on this game at all, and I'll put it on the wish list. And it didn't seem to really hurt anything. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of these little flare-ups of controversies not making their way to being reported on, but definitely making their way to being review bombed type things on Steam. And honestly, at that point, had they not flagged that period of reviews, I wouldn't be surprised if the percentages are pretty much the same, because it very possibly would balance out. On the other hand, it also points out how Steam really has no chance. It's not just that they haven't succeeded with the Chinese market, they just have no chance to succeed with the Chinese market. Because either a whole bunch of China bots will try to manipulate the global Steam website instead of putting reviews on the Chinese Steam, which barely has any games on it, or Chinese citizens who have been brainwashed by better propaganda than any other country, I'd imagine, will, for their own reasons, either to improve their social credit score or because they really believe it, will put a whole bunch of review bomb posts. And that's not just video games, frankly. Chinese citizens tend to be some of the most notoriously ill-mannered and ill-behaved when they visit other countries and when they interact with other people. It's just not a population that's particularly educated to act that way, to act with what the rest of the world would consider manners. Moving on, White Owls Inc. trademarks Hotel Barcelona and Death Game Hotel in Japan internationally, which it feels like that's two different games. I thought it was going to be one game where they collaborated, and they seem to be doing it under a different production company too, which maybe means that neither one of these games are actually going to have much input from Suda51 or Swery65. It's very little news to get reported on, frankly. Football Manager 2023 delayed to an unannounced date. We already talked about that. Sherlock Holmes The Awakened remake has its first gameplay trailer, which, yeah, one would assume that the graphics are going to look really good, even blurred out, as far as the Sherlock Holmes game. That although the story still has to be fairly good, and the gameplay mechanics have to actually control very well. In a lot of ways, the gameplay mechanics that they're showing as far as lockpicking and making logical deductions are things that could have just been in a point-and-click adventure. Maybe there'll be some quick-time events, or maybe there'll be more 3D environments where you walk around and you find hidden things and find collectibles. These scenes here for the Sherlock Holmes game are very sci-fi or very fantasy, magical based, not science fiction, I guess. So that in the title leads me to believe that the whole thing potentially is going to be a dream sequence, and it's going to be fairly weird for a Sherlock Holmes story. And Frogwares is doing it, and I don't know where I really land on whether Frogwares has a chance of making good games, good Sherlock Holmes games, or whether or not they're doing something shady with their developers / publishers, or not. There was definitely some controversy with Frogwares that have happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's another controversy around it. Octopath Traveler details several more characters if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. And then we're at the games that came out on Steam. This looks like nothing. Star Wars Skywalker Saga Galactic Edition. I guess this maybe is a bundle that includes a heck of a lot of DLC, which, if anything, this highlights the problem of Lego games, recent Lego games in particular, embracing and pushing little kids in particular into buying DLC. $70 for all the DLC is not crazy, but it sucks, to say the least, that there is any DLC in the game, or at the very least that the DLC is entire like season 1 packs of characters. Most of these are just going to be minifig characters. Bad Batch character pack. This may have some levels in that because it's not labeled as a character pack. This one's a character pack, this one's a character pack, this one's a character pack. These two, not so much. This is a character collection. This is a character collection. What's the difference between a collection and a pack? Maybe you get slightly more characters. It's a vacation pack here may be different. Clone Wars pack may be different. And Trooper pack may be different. Yeah. But yeah, that's a lot of DLC that shouldn't be there. I could justify maybe the Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 packs if they add actual levels. If none of these actually add levels, then I would say none of them are really justified, and they should have been released either for free as free updates or just in the game to start with. I will be interested to see where TT Games ends up going as far as their Lego games and Warner Brothers in the merger. I wouldn't be surprised if they get sold off or spun off, or this is the last, possibly the last few Lego games they'll ever make, because Lego also has some other options now for some other companies that want to make different types of Lego games that I think Lego would be more happy with, instead of solely focusing on minifigs. Which Lego really hasn't been pushing minifigs much in quite a while, frankly. They very possibly are running out of ideas for minifigs as far as their collection packs. Well, I can't put that on the fall list even if I wanted to. The Hideaway just looks like it's a bunch of pretty sceneries and nothing else, so that'll be a no. And on this Wednesday, I imagine if we are going to see bundling of adult games on Wednesdays, we should see some adult games today. Although it might very well be a case where it's every other Wednesday if there's any kind of bundling happening as far as the release dates. Rethink 4, I'll give a follow, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. This guy, I believe, unless I'm confused, he has some weird way in which he does Rethink, and then he does Rethink Evolved. Unlike the normal Rethink games, these include physics and other feature ideas for more dynamic gameplay. So he sells the normal Rethink games, which don't have dynamic physics, which really should. But then he kind of goes around in circles selling the same game twice. And he's not really asking for a lot of money, but he is definitely double dipping. He's also not really doing anything new as far as creating a new concept of a game. But I really wouldn't call him a scammer or anything else. He's being pretty obvious on it. As far as, here's some laser games, they look really pretty. I'm selling them 2 ways, and I'm not asking a lot of money for it. There's way worse people on Steam, and he doesn't particularly flood Steam with his games either, because even though they are up to Rethink 4, he's done that over the course of a couple of years. This is Hell. I think I would say no to this. It's not quite visually polished enough to interest me. I guess this falls under a troll game category is what I would say. I probably would be in trouble if I tried to play this on YouTube. So yeah, I think we'll say no to that. While most would agree with the sentiment, I think taking the extra time to say it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it comes off as either being trolly as a way of saying, hey, let's put this imagery in a video game and see if we can get away with it. I'll give this a follow. Or it becomes SJWE, where it's some slacktivist saying, yeah, I hate that guy, when that guy, who I'm actively trying not to name, has been dead and irrelevant, really. I mean, historically relevant, modern times completely irrelevant. It boils down to the same, calling neo-Nazis Nazis and making the confusion there too, or just calling people Nazis when they aren't actively claiming to be neo-Nazis or Nazis. It's just overusing a word and destroying the meaning behind the word. Otherwise, we seem to be getting mostly just garbage games. Prosecuted. And the only thing interesting here is being an animal shooting another animal in cuffs. Like this imagery is evocative, I would say, but then everything else here looks awful as far as just a strategy gameplay that I wouldn't want to play. I'll give this a follow. It might be something. Now, I'm fairly free to give anything a follow at this point because we're burning through the follow list so quickly. Alright, so here we've got an adult game. Saint Yaraman's Little Black Book Complete. And I would say this is the flatter, more anime style of animation. Although it is worth pointing out that all the women in this are of a particular body type, in which they have very large, low hanging breasts up to like G cups, double G's, things like that. And this is definitely taller characters, definitely not in the moe art style, and arguably not even animated by Japanese animators, but not animated badly. Thick hips, hourglass shape for all the characters, like ridiculous hourglass shapes, frankly, where their waists are way too small for the size of their breasts and their hips. Certainly is playing into a certain fetish. If you like a girl with meat on her, this is the kind of game for you. It's selling for $19.99, St. Yaraman's Little Black Book complete. Language wise, it says it has full Japanese and English interface and subtitles. Again, it is in the adult section. There are some screenshots that are straight out or pornographic. Over 10 hours of classic visual novel experience. It says a remake of the 2011 Japanese edition, redrawn by the legendary Cian. I don't know who Cian is, or Cianol. Maybe it's SIA, like SIAN or Slanil. Obviously that's an artistic name. Although for 10 hours it says over 15 fully uncensored scenes, so you're going to have to play for an hour at least to see one scene. I guess the question comes down to, is there a reason that I need to put this game on the follow list? I would say no. But if it interests you, I would suggest it. The text looks like there's quite a lot of text in it. Also, so like every single screenshot has at least 2 sentences worth of content, if not 4 to 5 sentences. And interestingly, that does start us off on the more flat 2D animation side of the scales, instead of the 3D CGI realistic animation side of the scales. This is a Ticket to Ride clone, but in all fairness, I'm going to give it a follow, just because Ticket to Ride itself digitally is not that great on Steam or on PC. So a clone might be better, or it might be cheaper. It would be very strange if we only get one anime adult game today and no CGI adult games or realistic animation adult games. But that was quickly undone. So next we have Hand Simulator Rendezvous, which, yeah, it seems considerably less effort was put into this. You've got realistic 3D models of a girl and maybe a guy or two being shown, and that's it. It does not look particularly good at all. It's $4.24, so considerably cheaper in English only. But yeah. And with a name like Hand Simulator, you have to just assume that there is a lot of hand stuff going on. And there is one screenshot here where there is definitely some hand stuff being done by one male guy to another male guy. So it is oddly crossing the line from being guy on girl to being guy on guy, and almost never in porn does that work. Guy on girl's fine, 2 guys on girl's fine. girl on girl is fine. That all falls under what would be considered heteronormative for most people, even though it really isn't all heteronormative. Um, but once you start having guys touching each other, interacting in any way other than having a girl in between the two guys, that crosses a line into guy on guy stuff that most straight people aren't interested in seeing. So now the scales, I suppose, are balanced. We have one more realistic art style adult game and one more flat 2D anime style, kind of anime style. It is a anime style. It's not what you'd immediately think of as an animated style. Maybe I should stop saying anime and just say animated. Nameless Departed Cycle looks like it's probably just a visual novel. English only. I don't think there's really anything here that's grabbing my attention, so we can say no to that. Pink Eye. Seems like it's a troll joke around GoldenEye, which I have to applaud the name as far as a joke. That they're really, it would have made more sense if there was a GoldenEye parody called Pink Eye, but obviously that's not getting a follow because of that. This must be some kind of like Chinese global version of an MMO. Terra Global. It's already mixed, so people are not liking it. 3 battle passes, $60 each month, not including summon cards. Skip this pay to win trash. Get more hours on iOS. Another mobile trash, avoid like fire. That is certainly something that I think Steam is going to have to start to address. This is people just trying to port pay to win mobile trash games on the Steam. Although that's something that really Valve and Steam would have to deal with a decade after it became fairly ubiquitous that mobile games did come to Steam. Right now they are much more interested in just having more games on Steam in general, particularly mobile games being ported to Steam. I'll give this one a follow. And with the Steam Deck, we almost certainly will start to see more mobile games be converted to Steam just for the Steam Deck. Paradiddle is a VR drumming game, so I'll give that a follow. Like, that is one thing that probably should be in the PlayStation VR 2 lineup, is a rhythm game, a drumming game, a music game of some sort. Something where you're doing something other than first person shooting. Again, I'll give this a follow, although this very well could just be an asset flip first person shooter. Let's see, Soul After is an RPG Maker. We're really not seeing very many RPG Maker style games anymore. I assume that this is a Korean only game. I would have said maybe Chinese only, but okay. Trying to burn through all of this faster. Okay, so is this an adult game? Let me just double check all the screenshots here. It's not in the adult section. It is tagged hentai, but half of the anime games are tagged hentai. Alright, well, as far as I can tell, Midnight Rhapsody here is not actually an adult game. It looks like it's just flat animated anime girls in lewd but not nude poses. Really seems like there might only be 2 girls in there at all. $1.39. Says it has nudity and sexual content in it. Supports a whole bunch of languages. Yep, that's an easy no. But I guess that is potentially another tick into the animated style of adult games. And if anything, this is breaking the idea of potential bundling, in which realistic CG 3D models of adult games were being released on Wednesdays, and then flatter 2D animated style of adult games were being released on Thursdays or Fridays. This game, The Past Within, is part of the Rusty Lake series. I'm fairly certain, so it needs a follow and a YouTube short. The Rusty Lake series is a lesser known series of horror games, but there's a lot of them, and there's just a weird order that you'd have to kind of research to play them all in, which makes it kind of a nightmare to try and play. This looks like a demo for a really old CGA game. Say no to it because it's a demo. We can definitely say no to this garbage game. This looks like this is a soccer management game, which we can say no to that. And at a certain point, I guess all of these picks are my own personal opinion, so if you are a huge fan of... I'll give this a follow, but no YouTube short. I guess if you are a huge fan of the management style games, you would want to see a YouTube short around those. Next we have My Needy Neighbor Girls, which is a collection of flat, more animated characters. And one character is in a bath towel, one character is in a bikini suit, one character has giant breasts, where the other characters have large breasts but not as huge as the other character. So there's definitely more variety. There's a gray-haired character, a black-haired character, a pink-haired character, a brown-haired character. It is a match 3 type game like Honey Pop. It's $3.39 and English only, which that does bring about another aspect as far as what is important to people in general and what is important to me. Actually, all these screenshots are just lewd. Is it more important for me to classify a game based on the languages it supports and say, well, this one doesn't support Japanese, so this probably is a Western game that has just either purchased or stolen anime characters to make their game, which is a possibility, certainly, but unprovable? Or is it more important to say, well, this is a flat animated style, and the flat animated style needs to evolve to be a worldwide style that everybody can do and can do well? And I guess in an ideal world, I would prefer that the flat animated style did become something that people around the world could do and could do well. Unfortunately, the current state is that most Westerners outside of the Asian countries just don't draw enough, so their animators aren't that good, and so you get these awful animations from the United States, from Russia, from the UK and Europe and those places. As for this specific game, again, nothing really special there, so no reason that would go on the follow list. And then let's see, next, is this another adult game? No. This is an English only game though. So here you have more of a Western animation style on a visual novel. It is still the flat 2D style, but it is a different style. It's flat 2D, but it's a completely different style, I would say. It's a better way to phrase that. Yeah, I am trying to dig down to a way to categorize and explain this better as far as the different animation styles, and I've not put enough energy and time into it to really devolve it. Like, ideally, there should be a way that I could pop up just like a reference on the screen to say, alright, this is the style I'm talking about. This is what you should expect. This should be in a language that people can understand and expect when you're talking about a certain type of game here. Because right now I would call this like wannabe anime style, or Western anime style is the best descriptor I can use. But what does that really mean to people who don't know what anime style even means, because there's been multiple anime styles? So honestly, it is just easier to show the animation and let people see it, but I wish there was a better way to categorize it too. Maybe it's unnecessary though. Maybe a picture is worth 1,000 words. Wandering Duelist. There's something interesting about this, but it's so visually like blown out. And I know some of these screenshots feel like they are getting blurred or something when they really shouldn't be. But even at that, this just does not look right. Single player narrative driven adventure game tells the story of love, conflict and reckless actions around a warped world. I'm gonna give this a follow because I'm wondering if maybe there is a game here and it's just so different having a world around a tiny little sphere, or that I'm not recognizing what might be something very creative or genius. I don't really suspect that's the case, but there's a small chance that's the case. And I don't want to miss out on something that is just amazingly innovative. Whereas I can skip this game because I don't see anything special there. It is always a possibility that some game is doing something so creative, so innovative that it just goes unrecognized by me and everyone else, but very rarely can you even cut a game that much slack and give it a chance. Noticeably, it does seem like today, for Wednesday, we didn't see a lot of adult games. And if anything, I would say we may have slightly more of the flat 2D animated style today. One more. Which helps balance out all the other days when it's usually way more in the CG 3D animation style, CGI style. We should be close to the end now. Last of Us goes tabletop with Escape the Dark board game. So they are putting a lot of effort in promoting The Last of Us and trying to make it a thing, which still feels very crazy because I have a hard time believing that there's going to be a Last of Us 3 or a prequel. According to GameDeveloper.com, ex-Pokemon Go developers have formed a self-funded studio called Bodhieville Games. Which, okay, that's great. What are they going to do? Because you really can't make Pokemon Go work without Pokemon. That you can't make it work that much without Pokemon. And I think particularly because of the pandemic and just Pokemon Go being a thing that's been done already multiple times, I don't think you can make another game that is an augmented reality walking app. So hopefully they would hope to do something new and different. Where I talked about Onoma being shut down. At a certain point, it almost feels like it should have been shut down just because of the just because of the bad name on it. Elite Dangerous's developer Frontier has acquired a Canadian studio called Complex Games. Is Elite Dangerous actually a finished product, or is that one of the ones that is still being developed? That's the question I guess I would want to know. I think Elite Dangerous actually was a finished game. Duel marks Frontier's first external studio acquisition. We're still seeing a lot of studio acquisitions. The game Unpacking has topped 1 million sales in 1 year, which I guess that means it's popular. I don't really know why. The PlayStation VR 2 will cost $549 and launch in February, which is a ridiculous amount of money. Ridiculous amount of money. Let's see. Activision Blizzard also has filed a motion to suspend a union vote at Blizzard Albany. Activision Blizzard is arguing that the collaborative nature of video games means that the National Labor Reviews Board's usual process doesn't entirely apply to the ongoing unionization efforts. This is more of the same, basically, and yeah, Activision Blizzard is actively trying to fight unionization. Microsoft is probably secretly hoping that they don't unionize too. I wouldn't be surprised if there is straight up retaliatory action that just shuts down the entire studio before they unionize. Or when they get acquired. And there's an interesting thought certainly there as far as if you're unionized in a company and then your company gets acquired by another company, I would assume you're still unionized at that point. So this could be an interesting twist in which a union starts to spread up inside of Microsoft, which they don't want that. The more interesting thing from this, since this is just repeated stuff, this is like they're gonna do as much as they can, Activision Blizzard is, to stop the unionization, and they're gonna try everything and have their lawyers try everything to union bust. But what's more interesting here is that the post has been updated to clarify Activision Blizzard's motions and stance on including Albany's non-QA departments in the voting process, which this is basically the same argument they've tried to make multiple times to say certain people shouldn't have been allowed in the vote, and that potentially would have shifted the vote. But it really is just trying to pick at straws, in my opinion, and isn't going to go anywhere. I think that there will be a union that happens there, and maybe that'll be the thing that stops the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger or acquisition more than anything else. It certainly would show the power of a union and the fear that corporations have against unions. And Activision Blizzard is not like the most exploitative company ever. It's not a Walmart that is exploiting its workers like ridiculously. Although I guess in a different way it really is exploiting its workers quite a bit. But yeah, I kind of don't even want to get into a rant on that because there's no new news to really talk around that other than legal filings, and that's not going anywhere. PlayStation Home, Sony PlayStation 3's social space has been revived. It's been 7 years, but the true metaverse is making a comeback, legs and all. So they're bringing back PlayStation Home. I don't really care. There we go. As far as our fall is cleanup, we've got a Chinese looking game here that is terrible, so we can immediately move that from the follow list. X section from 2021. I might consider keeping this as far as making cross sections. Zio survival. We're going through the X's, so I'm gonna be at the end of my fall list fairly quickly. Zenra doesn't look like anything. Invaders. I guess I say no to this because it's just not relevant. Zangle. Yeah, I think I can say no to this. Also, it wouldn't surprise me if everything that starts with X is pretty bad. Now we're at the W's. Witchwood is rated very positively, so we'll put that on the wish list. Alright, and then that would be everything. And do we even have any new missions today as far as watching a Duel live? I may just start Duel live anyways. Then we can wrap up. We went long today at 3 hours and 47 minutes. And I don't really know if there was a reason that we went so long today. Let's see. Infinity Ward says they've recently released an update to fix an issue that prevented players from editing their profile showcase. Additionally, they fixed various map exploits and bugs across the game. Stay tuned as we provide further game updates. I did see a little bit more of the Halloween outfits and Halloween photos. Not really a lot, and none of it really having to do with video games. Inherently, I think it's a case that kids that are dressing up will dress up as like Mario and Sonic, and that's about it, because those are the only pre-made costumes that are available. Most kids are not dressing up as video game characters. So yeah, Halloween very much is not a video game holiday. It's not much of anything holiday, really. It's just, let's play pretend and dress up and eat some candy, and that's a fine thing to do every now and then. You don't even have to wait once a year to do that. I personally would prefer cosplay for younger kids, or costume just pretending play, to be a more common thing. And little girls are somewhat encouraged to play dress up, but little boys not so much. And candy is not particularly good for anybody. Yep. And there's no new news on Twitter, which that may become the standard thing otherwise, is that any new video game news, if it even happens, will stop being announced on Twitter with Nebel. There's no new news as far as Nebel giving up, which Yeah, I can't really blame him. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.